The blog was a formidable reflective tool in all aspects of creating the 3 media products. Throughout the project, I have used the blog as a catalyst for my ideas, as well as cataloguing them in a chronological order, which means the development and links between pre-production, production and post-production are clear. The blog also helped me whenever I needed to reflect on my plans, sources, examples of media content and the codes and conventions that I was looking at. It also allowed me to ensure that iconography and mise-en-scene and other such elements were consistent, correct and well informed. The reason for this is because I was able to quote from my other research as well as check that my research was correct, and as the blog website is laid out in a manner that allowed me to quickly find a post, I could easily check this research and find it within seconds. There is also no word limit, so I can write as much as was needed. In the production stages of the trailer, the blog helped me to check on my planning and act as a checklist for the production, as well as something that allowed me to evaluate how the filming went as we went on. This allowed me to reflect on my mistakes and learn from them. The blogging product we end up using was Google's free blogger.com. There are other options available to us. These include Tumblr, Squarespace, blog.com and WordPress, most of which are free except for Squarespace, which was a paid product. These are all great products with different positives and negatives. Out of all of these, I would say Tumblr was the last choice for us to use because it was only a microblogger and also a social network. It is only used for short blogs and social media, and therefore not a good choice for documenting the creation of a piece of media. We decided to use Blogger because we have easy access to the site, as well as you get access to all Google products when you create a Google account, meaning that if we need to use Google Drive or any other such thing to share and link the team together with the content we had, we were able to do so because we had access to the Google products already. The problems we experience are adding new posts at later dates. This means if you miss something, you had to add a post and then change the date of the post so it was in chronological order. This section is going to be talking about the camera. So in the last year I used my own camera equipment, which was the Sony HDR PJ200E. I found with this camera, the image I achieved, whilst it was usable for the production, was very amateur. There was very high amounts of noise in the image, which I believe to be due to the sensor size of 5.3. This means there is very little definition in the image. We used this camera on one day of the filming this year, when we were filming the leaders' shots. The reason that we used this camera is because it was the only piece of equipment that was available at the time. Due to the quality of the equipment and lighting conditions, the footage wasn't as good as the rest, so we only used a small section of the footage. If we had time, I don't think we would reshoot, but rather apply an effect to make this footage look like a CCTV recording. Therefore, the low quality wouldn't be as surprising because it matches what we expect from CCTV footage. I feel this would add more variation in the shots. So, in a sense, this camera became our B camera, as it was easily available. However, for our A camera, which we would use for the rest of the shots because of the quality change, we used the HXR-NX30E Sony camera, which had a 20.3 megapixel sensor, considerably larger than the Sony HDR PJ200E. It also has the ability to film in standard and high definition quality. This was useful because it gave us an option. We used two variations of this camera. One had an XLR input, so we could record audio on the boom pole and change the preferences of the audio and the signal going in. This means that we could change the quality and the amount of noise picked up so that maybe it would avoid picking up any background noise. The camera with the XLR input also had a handle that was great to use for moving shots. The other only had a jack input, so the mic couldn't be close to the actors. Both had the same quality in video, and I feel that they were massive improvements on last year's camera. My reason for this is the video is much clearer even when used in low light situations. There is less noise and options to change the settings of the camera, such as ISO and white balance, which allowed us to carefully customize and tailor the look of our image to what we were trying to achieve. However, some disadvantages of this camera are, firstly, the fact that it's heavier than the B camera, and therefore if we are going to balance it or use it on equipment, especially equipment other than the tripod, such as camera rigs, steady cams, other such pieces of equipment like sliders, it could become unbalanced and fall and possibly get damaged. Luckily, this didn't impact on our filming, as we weren't using any such equipment. It was also larger than the other camera, so it's harder to use in certain situations, whereas with the other camera we could get it into high places or in small crevices and get lower angles. This of course was very central for our production and evaluation to film our audience feedback. During the research and planning stages, I compared our choices. The other cameras we considered using were the Canon EOS 1200D digital single lens reflex camera with an EFS 18 to 55mm f-stop 3.5 to 5.63 lens. The reason we considered using this as a camera is it has greater functionality because of its ability of interchangeable lenses. These can be controlled a lot more than the camcorder because of the possibilities of using other lenses, creating lens flares, which were a key point of the science fiction genre, as well as filters. All of these possibilities and factors would add up to a more focused and cinematic image which could be controlled more than the camcorder, especially the f-stop rating and the dynamic range, which can dramatically change an image and make it look much more cinematic. I also considered the Nikon D3200, the next upgrade from the 1200D, which has a 32 megapixel sensor, much greater than the camera we went with. I feel like if we had access to one of these cameras, either the 1200D or the D3200, the quality of the overall product would naturally have looked much better, have a much more professional aesthetic, and the cinematography would have had a bigger impact on the image and its colour. There would have also been more room to move in the cinematography, as we've been able to push the levels and contrast of the image much higher because of the increased quality. However, when considering any media product, this could always be said, lighting is also a key part of getting a better image. I think this could have improved the image of my trailer, however the content is mostly what makes a good trailer, as proven by my survey. Content is mostly what makes a good trailer, however, and this was proven by my survey into the potential demographic during the research and planning stages. This survey was published and created through SurveyMonkey, another media technology which is a great advantage in finding out your target audience and also what your target audience wants from a media product. I think this answered a lot of questions and helped us focus the trailer so that it would be what the audience was looking for. However, these DSLRs could have helped with the print media, as it was highly likely that they would have also got high quality photos during the photo shoot, because we used our film cameras as well, which had the ability to take stills. The microphone used was a Rode NGT2, however it was seldom used, and in the final edit there was only a narration used, and so the dialogue was discarded. However, I think that the quality of the audio that we did get was very professional, and unlike other digital technologies that we have took advantage of during our production, this equipment was the closest we got to being Hollywood standard. The reason for this is because my research indicates they would probably, other than using a wind cover and external recorder, a Rode mic is standard in digital media production. This section is about visual effects. Visual effects were key to our production. I used 2 different pieces of software for the visual effects of the trailer. The main software I used was Adobe After Effects, which is the standard in compositing software. Unlike the other software that I used, HitFilm, After Effects has much more control and capabilities in its effects, and also has the ability to use plugins, and I think it would have particularly helped with the explosion effect. There is more options in After Effects. It can create shapes, use masks, and algorithms to control the effects. The particular addition of masks and shapes allowed me to create elements such as the hologram, as well as the gunshots and such, by masking the shapes and adding a glow effect. In my research, although I mentioned HitFilm, I thought we weren't going to need to use it, and After Effects would be our main software because of its increased power. However, I found that without plugins, After Effects was unable to achieve some of the effects we required. Had I access to Action Essentials at the time, I would have used it because the results would have been much more refined than what I produced from HitFilm. However, I used HitFilm because it provided drag and drop effects such as rocks, explosions and gunshots, which would have taken time for worse results in After Effects. I didn't really look at other software in my research and planning. There are 2 reasons for this. The first is that there are very few other options, with software only becoming a recently available thing to the masses. The software that I've seen is such as Autodesk, Nuke, Maya, and other such pieces of software. But these are covering 3D effects. I would have liked to implement 3D into our trailer, however I feel I didn't have the time to learn the software and use it to create the effects required to a professional standard. I think that the effects could have been much improved, however I am pleased with a few of them. It is important to remember that time and software restrictions have had a big effect on the quality of my effects. The effects I was most displeased with was the explosions that I created, and I think that these would have been much better, like I say, had we had access to other software and plugins. There was also some problems with the rock explosions because I cut the effect too quickly and it's missing for a few frames. For the print productions, I used the standard in photo manipulation Adobe Photoshop. I also used Illustrator to create the poster prop, as it is a vector-based piece of software. The reason I use this software is that, like most Adobe products, it is 100% adequate for the job, and I am also in the process of completing a course in graphical design which covers products such as posters. In this course we have been trained to use Photoshop, and if you apply for a job in graphical design, you would need to be able to use Photoshop adequately. As such, this is why I use this media technology, as it is a tool which is so diverse in its possibilities and software, and I am comfortable enough to be able to use it to produce professional standard material. There are other options such as GIMP, a free photo editing software that was created in 1996. It's the most powerful photo editing software you can get for free. I've used this in the past, however the problem with it is that its interface is quite difficult to use. GIMP is powerful but harder to learn than other editing software. The problem with other pieces of free software can be the lack of capabilities to use layers. This means the backgrounds couldn't be placed in. In fact, most of these pieces of software compare well to the free editing software you would get on your phone. The most they can do is make your images look better. A useful tool, no doubt. However, for a magazine cover, you also need to add professional fonts and other such elements like borders and effects. I would have been unable to use the fonts like Coalition and Steel Tongues on software such as Paint or Foxo. The whole issue with these editors is that their power is very minimal. So I use Photoshop simply because I was fortunate enough to have access to a powerful piece of software, which as an industry standard allowed me to manipulate the images so I could match the themes and iconography that I was threading throughout the products. These key factors are colour schemes, the natures of the characters, and the dystopic overtones, especially where the locations and effects are concerned. Photoshop helped me achieve this through full layer support, which allowed me to use the conventions of superimposition. This combined with the blending mode capabilities are what allowed me to layer the images above each other and blend them together. The eraser also helped me achieve this. Other than the vector image in the poster prop, I didn't create any artwork. The reason for this is that none of the print media examples that I looked at used any artwork, especially in magazines. While there are examples where art has been used in print media, I decided to go with the majority of magazine covers and posters. These mostly use photo images. I think the reason for this is simply because if you're using an image, you will get to see the actors and characters and any costume in a more physical form rather than a representation. This builds hype among audiences as they'll clearly be able to see more of the cast and people in it. They may then include other artistic versions, which I have also done, to sell as collector's items for a niche audience. In terms of special effects and compositing for the magazine, I use lighting and rendering effects to simulate the red lighting we couldn't use on the green screen. Remove the screen, lit the character red and placed him in front of a blue background so this colour scheme was being used. I wouldn't have been able to do this if I hadn't used this media technology because of its power. I also wouldn't have been able to create the lens flare and puffs or stickers and so on. The reason I was able to polish up the cover and add the fine details is because Photoshop is something that can easily render or create content. For the poster, the capability of importing brushes, which could be done in GIMP also, however Photoshop is what I am comfortable to use these in, was essential. I used the brushes to create the gunshot as well as erase parts of the characters' images so they blended into the city. All of the texture and colour was only possible due to Photoshop as well as convention of things such as the billing block, which I could drag and drop in. I think that software such as Photoshop highlights the themes that Baudrillard talks about in his theories of simulacra and simulation, because we are no longer entirely certain as to what is real and what is false, because a lot of things are being simulated because of the power of media technologies. I've discussed the use of technology throughout our media trailer. Overall, I think it was incredibly successful, and while things could have been improved by using other software or plugins, for the majority of the production, I'm pleased with what we decided to choose for all aspects of creating as well as cataloguing the content and how we created it. Thank you.